we see this disingenuous comparison between price of a new boiler, £2,000, price of a heat pump, £13,000. Well, clearly a heat pump is not £13,000. It's the energy transition where the bulk of the cost is, and that's a one-off transition cost. And it's really important that consumers don't get in their mind this view that every time they've got to replace a heat pump, it's another £10,000 or whatever it is, because it won't be. People say heat pumps can't be sexy. Bath Abbey, look, it's a 1,000-year-old building, give or take. It's now heated by 2,000-year-old wastewater. How sexy is that?
That's pretty sexy for
That is pretty sexy, isn't it? The Norwegian legacy is a massive sovereign wealth fund. Our legacy is leaky buildings.
Hello and welcome to Positive Energy, the podcast where we talk about cutting your energy bills and low carbon technology, powered by the ecoexperts.co.uk. I'm your host, Chris Hambling, and I'm joined by the editor of the EcoExperts himself, Roland Ellison.
Hello.
In this episode, we welcome back Bean Beanland of the Heat Pump Federation. Bean, it's great to have you back on the podcast. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Very lovely to be back.
So Bean, last time we had you on the show, we had a huge reaction on TikTok. I think some of our cut downs have amassed like 160,000 views or something like that. What's it been like to be a bit of a TikTok star?
Well, the vast majority of people, of course, have no idea. I told my children, and I've got 3 boys, they thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, it's always weird to see like just what takes off on that platform.
It was very strange. I mean, I don't do TikTok myself, but I was surprised actually how much you can see, not being a subscriber, of the numbers of views and what have you. So I did look at your channel and I thought, blimey, wow.
It's a real, it's
What's
a real.
all that about?
We thought the same as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's a reflection, is it, of the sort of polarising nature
Exactly.
of this whole debate. And we were talking off air about the general polarisation of just about everything in society at the moment. And I think we are seeing the TikTok piece is a reflection of the fact that there's a huge polarisation across even what we do.
As someone who speaks to consumers on a sort of weekly, bi-weekly basis, what are some of the concerns that people have that you can see are trickling down from the Telegraph or, the Conservative Party or Reform? Like, are there sort of persistent myths that you hear on a weekly basis?
Yes, there are. And some of them we don't hear because the audiences are self-selecting.
Right, so they're
they
more
tend
open
to be
to...
people who have already got one foot in a camp that's sort of related to either climate or fossil fuels or, what the future looks like. So to that extent, it's not a complete reflection across society. But I think that they are still concerned about quality. It's not so much concerned about quality. They're concerned about how they go about finding an installer who will deliver quality. How do they identify the good from the bad? Like every other sector, we have people in our industry who don't know what they don't know. And or they're concerned that some of the things that might need to be done will either push the price or be seen by the consumer to be more disruptive. We talk about increasing the size of radiators. Actually, I don't see it like that. I think this is about having radiators that are correctly sized. And if the radiators are correctly sized for a condensing boiler, they're actually not badly sized for an entry point for a heat pump. There are some people, I think, who would say, well, I'm not going to talk too much about changing radiators and changing, lots of changes in the house because that might put the consumer off. There's also a lot of talk about this question about fabric first, fabric second. And I think there's a school of thought that says, it must be fabric first. But the reality is that the trigger point for most people for transitioning away from fossil fuels to a heat pump of some sort is boiler failure.
Right.
The boilers will reach end of life at times which are not necessarily going to fit with I am in a position to want to do more to insulation or change my windows or whatever it might be. And so I think that we have to accept that we are never going to be in a perfect world. There will be a very small proportion of people who say, yeah, do everything. I'm gutting the house anyway.
Yeah.
Do it all.
Yeah.
Get me down to 35 degrees in the middle of winter. But the reality is that most people are not there. And I think it's more important for us to find ways of capturing those times when the boilers are failing and getting the transition done. It's perfectly possible, in my view, to manage the fact that if you put in a heat pump before you've done various other improvements to insulation levels or whatever, that you can manage the fact that the heat pump may be oversized in 4 years' time. The alternative is that we say to someone, we're not going to do your heat pump, and they just replace the boiler, in which case we've lost them for 10 years.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that we've got to be a bit more open. And when we have that discussion with consumers, they are, I think, relieved that they're not being told you must do it all at once.
Well, it's that
Because
whole,
very few of us have that luxury of being able to do everything all at once.
as we know, Sod's Law, your boiler breaks down when you've got
Yeah.
no money, you're completely skint and there's very little you can do about it. But I think that ripping out a perfectly good gas boiler that you've just installed recently is something that is being pushed as a narrative, which is definitely not the case. And I think,
not at all.
If you've got a decent boiler that's working well, installed in the last 4 or 5 years, wait for it to get to the end of its life.
We absolutely have to take the emotion out of this.
Yeah.
Ripping is not a good word.
I ban that word in my life because it was in both manifestos of the main parties, and it's never ever been a thing. The industry has never advocated premature removal of anything. That's very disappointing that they feel that sort of emotional language is required, because I don't think it is. I think we need to take the emotion out. But what we do need to do, I think, is to try and make more effort to prepare people for the point when their boiler reaches end of life, rather than waiting until it reaches end of life. So something in the region of 70-75% of boiler replacements are what we call distressed purchases. Boiler has failed.
Right.
It's beyond economic repair. What do? If you're not well prepared for the transition at that point, most people have very little choice, because you cannot afford to be without the staples of life, heat, hot water, for extended periods of time. And if it fails in the summer, then we've got to be able to provide consumers with the sort of service they require.
So as we mentioned, Beam, whenever we post about heat pumps, we get a lot of comments on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram especially. And what we've done is we've gone through and we've cherry-picked some of those comments, some of them good, some of them bad. And I just want to get your thoughts on them, in a sort of quick fire round. So there's a few here, and I'll just go through them one by one. So the first one we see a lot of is your electricity bill will go through the roof with a heat pump.
Your electricity bill will go up, of course it will, but your fossil fuel bill will go down and potentially go to zero if you get rid of the gas connection completely, and that gives you the gain in standing charges. If the electricity bill has gone up by more than it should, a good installer will have predicted the amount of electricity demand, then clearly there is a problem that needs to be analysed. The key thing here is that for under MCS and all the government programmes, the heat pump system has to have its own electricity meter, so a sub-meter. The homeowner can see very clearly where the electricity is going. The installer, the industry, can identify, is the electricity going into that heat pump system as we predicted? And if it isn't, we need to look for a problem. And I have seen this in the past when I was an installer. Consumer rings up, my electricity bill is very high still, went round, had a look. They had a lot of very, very expensive lighting control systems, which were very thirsty, but also I found an electric kiln.
So it's just draining the electricity then.
Yeah, so there are other things, and in the consumer's mind, they were thinking, well, I've decarbonised my heating, it shouldn't be costing me anything.
But the kiln is not helping.
The kiln wasn't helping. So this is part of the education, though. And it's really, really important that we don't dismiss these things and say, don't be silly, because it's not a question about being silly. We are in the proverbial state of affairs where there's no such thing as a silly question.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't stop consumers asking questions, because what we really want them to do is to understand everything they're doing as we go through the energy transition.
It's all connected, isn't it,
Yeah.
really? Yeah. Great.
Next.
Heat pumps are for electric companies and pushed by governments.
Well,
Quite a broad statement, but
yeah, I mean, I think that there's no denying that government policy is to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. So to that extent, that's true.
Yeah.
It is government policy. Is it something that the electricity companies necessarily want to pursue? Well, it probably is, but bear in mind that all electricity suppliers, and I think when they're saying companies, they mean suppliers, they also sell gas. So for them, actually, does it matter? Are they selling gas? Are they selling electricity? They're selling energy. And at least one of the CEOs of the big suppliers has said to me, I sell a lot of gas. I would like it to be zero, because they believe in the energy transition.
Yeah.
So to that extent, the answer to both of those, yes, they are. Are they pursuing electrification for their own purposes? No, I don't think they are.
yeah, because the person that benefits from it is the homeowner.
The person who benefits actually is everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if we decarbonise, we improve air quality, we improve the quality of the heated experience. Just about everybody who's made the transition and has a well-performing, weather-compensated heat pump reports a more comfortable lived experience.
A relatively positive comment that we had once was someone saying that they've had a heat pump since the 90s here in Norway. And then someone replied to that saying that heat pumps are very standard here in Germany as well.
Yeah, so we're a long way behind the rest of Europe. The Scandinavian countries have a lot of zero carbon electricity and have had for years. So they've got a lot of hydro. And so they've been following an electrification pathway in Sweden and Norway, for years, because based on that. And in fact, the Norwegians, of course, they had their fair share of North Sea oil and gas. They chose to sell it all and pocket the money, put it in their sovereign wealth fund. And that is now an enormous global investor. So they chose a different pathway. And I think the tragedy for me over the last few decades where we've had North Sea oil and gas is that the Norwegian legacy is a massive sovereign wealth fund. Our legacy is leaky buildings.
Right.
Because we've allowed people to burn cheap oil and gas instead of doing something about our buildings.
Yeah.
So that's a sadness. But yeah, most of Europe significantly in front of us.
I guess as well, it also speaks to that misconception that the UK is too cold for a heat pump and the heat pump will never get hot enough. But if countries that are way colder than the UK are adopting it as well as they are, I know there's lots of contributing factors.
We have to be a bit nuanced in the way we
Sure.
look at that because I'm sure that the immediate response to that is, well, the buildings are better in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
Yes, they are, but that doesn't mean that we can't do things to our buildings here.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, if you can heat a building with a boiler, you can heat it with a heat pump. I would argue now that the new generation of propane R290 heat pumps that will run up to 70 degrees are actually higher temperature heating devices than a condensing boiler, because a condensing boiler, in order to be in condensing mode, should be operating at less than 60 degrees. So I think we've reached an inflection point there. Bear in mind, we've got commercial heat pumps now that are doing dry steam, so they're sort of nudging 200 degrees. So the flow temperature piece is no longer a problem. But I think that the question about what happens in Norway, whether it's too cold, whether it's cold enough over here, those are a number of things being conflated together.
Yeah.
And actually what it all really comes down to is the operational cost. There have been 2 or 3 news reports run recently saying heat pumps are more expensive than gas boilers to run in the winter. Yes, they are. But once you get out of the depths of winter, once you get above 5 degrees, and the average temperature in the UK, winter temperature is around about 5 degrees, once you start rising above that, and you're still in the heating season, the heat pumps start to win hands down. And what we're really looking at is the total annual average spend, not is it more expensive this week? Because if it's cheaper the other 51 weeks of the year, actually does it matter what happens in that 1 week? So that's an angle which is, I think, looking for a negative as opposed to being clear that it's the annual cost. Most of us pay our energy bills with a direct debit. So no one is actually really being penalised in the winter. You've got to come up with a whole load of money in the week before Christmas to pay your energy bill, because the energy companies quite sensibly allow people to build up a credit over the summer. So
Yeah, a lot of nuance for a very simple comment that someone just makes on the internet, isn't it, essentially? Another one we have is heat pumps are a big, horrible, clunky thing that when it breaks, no one will want to touch it.
Well, look, some people will feel exactly that. They're big, ugly, Clearly, I don't think they're
quite
big and
trendy,
ugly.
I feel like, sometimes.
I think that the industry could do an awful lot more in terms of design. They're all pretty standard fare. I think we could see a lot more flair. And actually, some of the new machines coming through are really quite funky. I mean, we're moving to black and we've got some better looking devices. We've got, obviously, people like Octopus trying to break the mold with the Cozy 6 and Cozy 9. We're color coding machines to their background. We're skinning them with designs. I mean, brick, designs and what have you. So I think that that's being tackled. But I think this is about change and about people getting used to change. Most of us rebelled against wheelie bins. I still hate the things. But actually, we've all got them and they've become part of the street furniture.
Yeah.
We still don't like them, but actually everyone has them. Television aerials, I know, satellite dishes.
Yeah, I remember that.
So there's always going to be people who don't like certain things. Partly it's change, partly it's aesthetics. I don't want to dismiss their views because they're perfectly entitled to have their view. But I think for someone with that sort of opinion, we would say, okay, there's another alternative that we could give you to allow you to decarbonise your home that wouldn't be like this. It will come with different features and different associated either capital costs or operating costs. But one way or another, you would still be able to get yourself off fossil fuels.
Well, what about the second part of that question where it's when it breaks, no one wants to touch it? Is that something that's come from a lack of engineers and it's now being addressed?
Yeah, I think that the density of engineers who can work on a boiler that's failed, of course, is very high. The density of engineers who can work on heat pumps that are playing up is much, much slimmer. That creates a problem, not only in how quickly can you get that dealt with, but also what does it cost, because the engineers are having to travel further and what have you. Is that changing? Yes, it is. We are seeing the rise now of dedicated service and maintenance companies in our world. We are beginning to respond to the market demand. And of course, all this is fundamentally driven by market demand. You've got to remember, we're putting in 1.6 million boilers a year. That's bound to drive a market to look after 1.6 million boilers, whereas we're only putting in something between 60 and 100,000 heat pumps a year. Clearly, that market is much smaller. So we would have, I think, a greater growth rate in engineering capability and capacity if we had clearer direction from government. So at the moment, we still got the hydrogen question hovering, and we've still not got that very explicit, we are going down an electrification route to heat our buildings, all of our buildings, not just homes now. And therefore, people who are in the oil and gas industry should think about retraining. Young apprentices coming through should think about taking the electrification route from day one. And that would, of course, immediately feed through to having more competition for service and maintenance, and that will drive down cost. And the other thing to bear in mind is that most heat pumps now are internet enabled. So when you put in a new heat pump, you could have in a maintenance contract the ability for your provider to come in over the internet and see your heat pump effectively. It's like standing in front of the controller. In the same way that a lot of people's IT support is remote. We can do an awful lot now with heat pump technology remotely. So that's your first line of defence.
Well, also, I think as well, most heat pump manufacturers give a sort of service warranty anyway for
the warranties are
15
good.
years. Yeah.
The warranties are good. The provision of a service contract is down to the installer rather than the manufacturer. A lot of them will be obviously supported with technical support from the manufacturer, and it's important to make sure that, and I think most installers understand that they want to deal with products where the technical support is really robust. You want to make sure you've got really good in-country tech support, and for most domestic machines, that is available.
Another question we had was, or not a question, or a statement that we had was, heat pumps have a maximum temperature inside your house of only 19 degrees. They are useless.
Well, clearly, I don't think they're useless. I'd be out of a job. So, no, clearly, I don't think they're useless. I think that there has been a lot of misunderstanding around what can you achieve in terms of internal temperatures with particular heating devices. Because if your emitter system, if the way you get the heat into the building cannot get above 19 degrees, it doesn't matter what's firing it. You could have a massive furnace blasting away in the background. If the emitter system can't get the building above 90 degrees because it's just not designed to, then it won't happen. If you can heat a building effectively with your fossil fuel boiler and you find that for whatever reason, when you made the transition, you can't get it above 19 degrees, all that tells me is that the design and specification of the system is wrong. I personally believe that our industry would serve itself well if it was all carrying professional indemnity insurance, because that then starts to give a design insurance package for consumers. Look, I could quite happily deliver you 23 degrees. And there are lots of care homes, for example, or people in accommodation that's now being built aimed at older generations where we're designing for 23 degrees.
Right.
Perfectly happily.
Yeah.
It's about understanding, what can we do? So in that instance, it might be that the heat pump was undersized. It might be that actually the emitters are undersized and that the care wasn't taken in terms of checking the radiator sizing. And again, it's not oversizing, it's correctly sizing.
The UK climate is too humid for heat pumps. That's one I've not seen before, but...
Yeah, so this, I think, is aimed at tackling the problem around the defrost cycle. We do have high humidity in the winter in the UK, and air source heat pumps are susceptible to defrost. So when we are taking effectively thermal energy, so heat out of the air, if the air is going in at the front with high humidity at less than 5 degrees, and we are taking out effectively, it's quite like this, but we're taking out sort of 3 to 5 degrees. What comes out the back gets close to freezing. Air below zero is dry. So what happens is all the moisture in the air creates frost on the machine. Periodically, an air source machine will switch into defrost mode. So it'll have detected that it's no longer efficient at harvesting energy because it's now frosted, and it will go into defrost mode. That's as a result of humidity. The key is to choose machines that do have very effective defrost cycles. The technologies vary. Different manufacturers use different ways of dealing with the defrost cycle.
But so it's like, regardless of the UK being too humid, heat pumps have defrost systems built into them anyway.
Absolutely,
to mitigate that.
The vast majority of the installations going in the UK absolutely are designed to cope with those conditions. We just have to make sure that we are building all of that into our training program so that the engineers we're creating, the technicians we're creating, the system designers and specifiers make sure that the systems are perfectly capable of coping. There's no reason why that can't be done.
Heat pumps aren't suitable for the UK housing stock. I know we've touched on that a little bit already.
Yeah, so again, this whole debate about what does the UK housing stock look like, and we do have the oldest on average housing stock across Europe, and much of that is leaky, and there are a number of graphics that you can point to which demonstrate that the UK properties tend to lose heat faster than the equivalent across most of Europe. There is a much greater recognition now about improving the fabric of our buildings, and we have, I think, been very slow at actually getting to a point where we're building buildings that don't come with a problem. We now have the Future Home Standard coming. We've been talking about building homes which are effectively net zero ready for the last 10, 15 years, and it's only now that we're edging towards the legislation that will make that provision.
I guess because we now have the technology that benefits from it, and it's more part of the public conversation potentially.
It is part of the conversation.
It's like chicken or the egg.
There's a much greater awareness now that we should all be doing things to insulate our buildings. And there are things that you can do which are relatively low cost. Insulating loft space. A lot of people still don't have appropriate levels of insulation in their loft space. And I think that people don't quite understand, because they've not been taught, how much impact that can make. You could probably, on average, you're going to cut your demand. If you go from nothing to really well insulated, you're going to cut your energy demand by 15% probably. So there are some low cost things. The other thing is draft.
Yeah.
Draft will strip heat from buildings. So we need to be much, much more conscious about dealing with drafts and that whole sort of ventilation piece, making sure we've got enough air, enough oxygen, enough fresh air to maintain a healthy atmosphere, and yet try and avoid situations where we've got huge amounts of draft. So I think it's in the consciousness. There is no reason why we can't heat leaky buildings. And I could point you at any number of period and listed buildings that are heated entirely with heat pumps. There are some very, very big examples. Bath Abbey, entirely heated with water source heat pumps.
Right.
People say heat pumps can't be sexy. Bath Abbey, look, it's a 1,000-year-old building, give or take.
Yeah.
It's now heated by 2,000-year-old wastewater. How sexy is that?
That's pretty sexy for
That is pretty sexy, isn't it?
So it's almost a case of the UK housing stock
went out here.
But the UK housing stock isn't perfect for a heat pump, but there are steps that people can take to make it more appropriate.
Well, I think it's not even, if you've got leaky housing stock, it's not going to change whatever heating system you put in.
Yeah.
You've still got to address the fact you've got leaky housing stock.
Yeah, exactly.
And then worry about how you heat it later on.
Yeah, I think that's really critical, that the building doesn't know where the heat's coming from. So the building is going to leak heat.
Whatever you put into it, it's going to...
Is it high cost, low carbon, or, high cost, low carbon, or low cost, high carbon? That's the debate we are having with ourselves, effectively.
Okay, one more. Heat pumps are too noisy.
Noise is a very personal thing. There are plenty of people that live under the main runways at Heathrow who sort of don't notice it. It's just there. In most urban environments, we've got a very high background noise level anyway. I entirely accept that some people are very sensitive to the noise of heat pumps, and some of it is direct noise, some of it is transmissive, vibration-ish. So again, we need to be better the way we install these things, making sure we don't get transmission. We already have transmissive interference coming from circulation pumps on fossil fuel systems. We need to make sure we're sensitive to where we put them.
Yeah.
We shouldn't really put a heat pump next to someone's bedroom window. But there are always alternative solutions. If we cannot sensibly put an air source monoblock in something, that's fine. There are going to be properties where we can't do that because there will be other decarbonising technologies that can be applied. So we shouldn't be shoehorning in devices where it's inappropriate. But what I would say is that most of the new generation machines coming through now are very quiet.
Yeah, it's one of their most of their unique selling points now about the decibels.
Yeah.
I think no one's ever worried about decibels until heat pumps got introduced. But
and we're all used to boiler flues making quite a bit of noise, actually, particularly on ignition. The constraints around the size of the box in permitted development is also important. So at the moment in permitted development rights, you only have permitted development rights if the box is under 0.9 of a cubic meter in volume. Clearly, if you could make that box slightly bigger, you could put in more acoustic attenuation in the box.
Right.
You could probably put a slightly bigger fan, slower rotational speeds. There are things that the manufacturers could do if they weren't faced with that constraint around.
Right.
Now, in the government responses to the permitted development rights consultation last year, it is proposed that limit is increased to 1.5 cubic meters. Now, it's getting bigger.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. But if it's getting bigger, it's a form factor that's more attractive. We've color-coded its surroundings. We've done all those things. Oh, and actually we've made it even quieter. Then I think we're doing a good thing. So it's really important, I think, to allow the manufacturers to do what they can by lifting those constraints. So I expect each generation of machine to get progressively quieter and quieter.
How do you know if your home would be suitable for a heat pump, or how do you know when it's the right time for you to get a heat pump? Because I'll draw upon my parents again. They recently got solar panels installed a couple of years ago. I think they've had new windows, insulation, all that lark. And I sort of asked them recently, why, have you considered a heat pump yet? Do you know about them? And immediately my mum was saying that they weren't thinking of getting one because they've only just recently had a gas boiler. So for them, that was like a hard stop, end of conversation. If you're a homeowner, when should you be thinking about getting a heat pump? What are the boxes that should be ticked that can make you think, I'm ready for a heat pump now?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So the first is, where do people get really good advice and where can they potentially try before they buy? So good advice is a challenge which government is currently wrestling with. Do they run a campaign? Should we have high street pop-up shops? Where do people get trusted advice? And I think that's the challenge. Who do people trust? And I think that people trust community champions. So for us, we try and empower community champions when we're out talking to people because that's a really good source. Trying before you buy, we have Nesta now have their visitor heat pump. So if you're thinking about it but you have concerns, you can put in your postcode on visitorheatpump.co.uk, I think, and within 20 minutes of your house, you'll be able to go and look, touch, feel, hear critically, so that starts to address your noise issue. And of course, this is one of your ports of call of identifying where's a good installer. Because if that homeowner has had a good experience, you like what you see, clearly that's a route to trying to identify. The question about whether or not your home is ready or not, we talked about fabric first, fabric second. So for most people, the trigger is going to be my boiler is reaching end of life.
Right.
And hopefully we will start to get people to a point where they're thinking about that before it hits end of life. So before you hit the buffers, you've started to think about it. One of the ways of testing preparedness, you could have the house surveyed, and that will survey the existing radiators, which will identify the flow temperature that's needed in the radiators. This is getting a little bit technical, but it's the only bit that really does. What temperature do you need to put into the radiators to keep that house at your required internal temperature? Let's say it's 21 degrees throughout. And can you do that at a flow temperature which is perceived to be attractive for a heat pump transition? Now, in theory, you should be able to do that with 55 degrees or less because that is the temperature at which your condensing boiler will be achieving condensing boiler efficiencies. So one of the tests that we used to apply when I was an installer was we would say to someone, okay, so in this heating season, you're thinking about doing it next summer. In this heating season, turn your boiler down to 55 degrees, but leave it on all the time. Can you keep the house warm? So it's crude, but it is a way of beginning to get a feel, actually, will my house cope with 55 degrees? So that's a critical part, I think, of the future, is that we are much more attuned to putting in fossil fuel systems where we are replacing fossil fuel systems and accept that that's going to be going on for many years still, that we're putting those in a way that is getting those homes ready for low temperature heating. We looked at the comparison in Europe. Most of Europe has been on low temperature heating, regardless of the source, for decades. We haven't. And I think that that's a really important feature. And one of the missing pieces of the jigsaw here is that when you are replacing a boiler, there is no mandate. You're mandated to be using condensing boilers. There's no mandate to commission them such that they spend the majority of their time in condensing mode. That mandate now exists in new build and in complete system. If you're replacing the whole system, there's a 55 degrees design mandate. There is no equivalent mandate if you're just replacing the boiler. That's something which does need to be addressed, because that would, first of all, improve the efficiency of the boiler fleet, which is good news for homeowners, but also it gets the whole country down to a low flow temperature society, which is really good news for the energy transition.
I'm definitely going to go home and turn my boiler flow temperature down to 55
I feel like I need to do that as well.
Got to be a little bit careful with system boilers because of hot
That's what I've
water
got.
storage temperatures.
Yes.
So
Legionella and all that sort of thing.
ideally, we should be able to, we should have boiler controls which say we can run the heating at that temperature, but when the diverter valve is switched to hot water, we're running at a higher temperature. But what we need to do is to make sure that our technicians and engineers operating in fossil fuels are much more attuned to trying to get the whole country towards a low flow temperature society so that we're ready for what comes next.
So to recap one last time then, so to know that your home is suitable for a heat pump, you should be able to heat it at a reasonable temperature in the first place.
You should be able to heat it at lower flow temperatures in the first place, yes.
And that might be because you're well insulated, you've got
It could
good
be
windows,
insulation levels. It could be, because look, there are several ways of bringing down the required flow temperature. You could improve the insulation. You could change some radiators. So look, when you survey a house for heat loss, you're also surveying the existing radiators. What temperature is required in that size radiator in that room to maintain 21 degrees when it's minus whatever the design temperature is. So let's say it's minus 3.4 or whatever. What that tells you is that, say you've got a 10-room house, you will have what we call the worst performing room, i.e. there is a room where the radiator sizing is such that that radiator needs the highest temperature in order to meet your requirements for space heating.
Everyone's got one
So
of those rooms.
everyone's got a worst performing room. It's physics.
Yeah.
There is always a worst performing room. Now, if you were to change that one radiator, okay, so you've only changed one radiator, now it's a different room, which is now the worst performing room. As a homeowner, you could say, well, I know that some of my radiators need to be changed. I know I'm going to be redecorating some rooms over the next couple of years. Each time I'm going to change the radiator when I redecorate, and I'm going to progressively bring my flow temperature down and make my heat pump system more efficient, or even make
Marginal
my boiler
gains.
more efficient.
Yeah.
So this is, again, about not forcing people to do everything all at once. It allows you to make informed decisions. And let's face it, in every walk of life, what people want to be able to do is to make informed decisions.
Yeah. I guess as well, it's maybe like rethinking getting a heat pump as a very long-term decision. It's part of a wider project that you've got of your home. It's not just, I want to save money on my energy bills, so I'm getting a solar panel, and that's like I bought the thing and now it's given me the thing. It's like viewing a heat pump as like a long-term decision that you're investing in your home in the future, I suppose.
We've got to give them choice, give them information to allow them to make really good choices, and then deliver.
You've recently launched a new podcast with Evan Davis called The Happy Heat Pump. Can you tell us a bit about how that came about and where people can listen or watch?
Yeah, that's very generous of you to allow me to promote that. Yeah, look, Evan Davis is interested in the energy transition. And if you listen to the introductory episode, he talks about the fact that this eventually will touch every building in the UK. And yet so few homeowners understand or know about the technology well enough. So for him, this is not actually a heat pump thing. This is about the energy transition. And for us, it's an adjunct to our existing community outreach and community engagement program. How do we get fair information across to people in an accessible and addressable way? So the Happy Heat Pump podcast, 15-minute bite-sized chunks, various topics We run periodic clinic versions where we respond to people's questions. So we're welcoming questions exactly in the same way that we've addressed the comments today. And the hope is that this will sit alongside the rest of our community engagement program to just get better sources of information, open up a fair debate and discussion alongside everything else we're doing. So yeah, it's part of that.
And where can people watch that podcast?
So it's available in all your usual podcast
All good record
places.
stores.
So, Apple, Spotify. It's filmed on YouTube, so you can, we have a YouTube channel. All the regular places.
Well, Bean, I think that's all we've got time for, but thank you so much for joining us again. It's been a pleasure having you back.
It's been great. Any opportunity to come and, talk about these things is good news.
Spread the good word.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching Positive Energy, and we will see you next time.